Alrighty, hey gang, welcome back, you guys. Episode 24 of Stove Chat, and happy to see you guys all here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I gotta move my camera just a little bit so I can see the chat there. There we go. All right. Well, you guys, happy Wednesday. Nice to see all you guys. Thanks for being here. Hope you guys are having a great day. Hope you guys are having a good week. Having a good one myself. It's nice and bright and warm out there. We got a little smoke, but not too bad where I am here near the coast. And been raining, actually. Rained all last night and day before. So I'm doing pretty good. Hope you guys are doing all right. Oh, good. Hey, Robin. All right. Hey, Belgian Gulch. All right. Pete. Always learning. Nice to see you guys. Adam, thanks for being here, everybody. Really good to see you. So, you guys are ready, it looks like. Right on. Indian summer there in Belgium, huh, Pete? That sounds nice. A lot of bike riding probably going on. That sounds awesome. Time for smoke-free chats, as always learning. Yeah, always learning. You're out here on the West Coast with me. I'm, like I said, I'm pretty fortunate, right? Because I'm way up here on the far northwest corner. And we've been getting rain, but I think you guys, you're down there by Portland. I know you guys are still dry and smoky, so hopefully it clears up for you. I can't even smell the smoke. It's just a little hazy. My air quality, I think what does it go? Green, red, purple on the EPA's thing, and I am still red, but I'm just on the cusp of green, so it's not too bad here. But yeah, feeling for all you guys on the West Coast here. And Belgian Gulch, you're going to be getting it here. You're starting to get smoky there, and I think you're going to get it for a few days here from us. So, hey, Mark, glad to see you there in Ohio. Positive Aspect, nice to see you, Dan. Thanks for being here. And Robin, yeah, I think I already said hi to you. So, all right. And Adam says, surprisingly cold here in the DC burbs. Hoping I still have time to try and build. I think you do, Adam. I think you do. You know, cold mornings, September, October, pretty normal. But it'll inspire you to build. And, you know, frankly, actually, that's something that we could talk about one day, but I'll just touch on it right now, is when's the best time to build? And I'll tell you, I think the best time to build is when you can burn without it being a bummer. It's hard to build in the middle of summer because you can't dry it from the inside out the way they really like to be dried out. You can't sit there and like burn it while you're adding cob to it. You can't, you know, it just changes things when it's real hot out. Plus it's hard to evaluate how it's gonna burn when it's hard to get draft. So I think building in the fall is a good time. And Adam, I'll tell you, I've only spent a little bit of time in DC. But man, I loved it when I was there, and I was there in November for that wood stove decathlon I was invited to a few years back, and in November it was like, what was it, like 65 in the daytime, 70. I used some of those little rental bikes and rode around DC. I love your city, killer place. So, all right, great to see everybody here. Rich, you made it, thank goodness, because I'm really excited to cover your topics there. Hazy in Michigan, says Rich. Yeah, we're sending our smoke your way. I don't think the fires are here, but they're not too far. And Claire in Kenya, thank you for being here. How cool is that? That's awesome. Hope you're having a great day or evening there in Kenya, or whatever it might be, morning. And Dan, thanks for waking up in the middle of the night for us. I know our schedule's not that great for you, so appreciate it. So Dan, hopefully you got my email back. I wasn't able to download all your photos. My internet is terribly slow. I apologize. If you could break those up for me and maybe shrink them down, I'd love to share them, and I'd love to see them. So thanks for sharing those with me, though. And that goes to anyone sending me photos. You guys are all doing a great job, but just so anyone new who knows, I have unfortunately just DSL out here in my rural area, so my internet is terribly slow, and if you send me really big emails with a whole bunch of photos on them, I can't even get them. It won't even let me. It'll sit there and like load and then reset and load and reset, and so anyways, side note. Okay, so hey, we got a lot of stuff to cover today, you guys. It's going to be a good show. I'm really excited about all of your builds, all of your input, all of your questions. Thank you so much for all that. And I've got some great questions today, some actually in the past week via email, and I think we got some really good topics to cover, and should be some stuff that hopefully sparks some great discussion amongst us, because I think there's some good stuff to go over. So I'll catch up with the chat here, and then we'll dive right into it. So Always Learning says, best time to build will be before Grand Solar Minimum Cycle 26, when the mini ice age begins, 2030 to 2040. Okay, I'm putting it on my calendar. Always learning. And here in the Anthropocene, as we progress from the Anthropocene to the grand solar minimum. That's pretty fun. Well, the mini ice age begins. Awesome. Well, I'm ready. I'm a carnivore already, so I don't know what you guys are gonna do, but I'm just gonna be chasing large ruminants around on the ice shelf. So, all right, here we go, you guys. So great questions, and one of the first ones, Rich, I want to get into yours right away. So, Rich came at me this week with something that, surprisingly enough, I've completely neglected to talk about in this past year, and I know why that is, but it was interesting to me when he brought it up, and I recognized my lapse because it was, when I first built my J-tube, it was one of my favorite topics of speculation and experimentation, and my wonderful neighbor Michael and I, who hopefully you guys follow his YouTube channel, Mike Festiva. You should. If you don't, it's amazing. But we used to lounge about on my J-tube, and he was building his at the time, and we would talk about this subject. And so what Rich is talking about is bedrolls en masse. And I won't quote your whole email here, Rich, but I'm just going to say, basically he's saying, what do you do about the bedroll, the cushion, whether it's for sleeping or sitting on a hot mass? He's been using a pile of various blankets and covers that pile up to about 4 inches. Oh God, Dan, I can't open that email right now while I'm streaming, but thank you. But I won't be able to do it right now, so I'll get to those later. Rich is talking about using multiple comforters and sleeping bags that pile up to 4 inches, and he's got 12 different blankets piled up. And he's wondering, what suggestions, materials for use, some examples. And then he sent a follow-up email that says he's been doing some research with regards to combustion temperatures, and he found that 300 degrees Fahrenheit was, roughly where you might start having spontaneous combustion type issues with some textiles. And so I think it's a really good topic, and I'd love to address it. So when I first started using my J-tube, I was pretty enthused about the concept. How should I say it? My concept was, excuse me, you guys, I gotta just check this real quick. Yeah. My concept for the pads was that I really felt like I wanted natural fibers on top of my bench. I really felt like that was my first inclination, was that when this thing heats up, I don't want to be off-gassing polyurethane, foam, or whatever it might be, foam internals as it warms up. So my goal was to try and use natural fibers. Now, my first J-tube was, as you guys know, kind of a corner with a J in the center, and so it was possible for sparks to pop out of that firebox and land potentially on the benches. So that also, informed my decision about what I was going to use on the benches, because I obviously didn't want anything there that was flammable and would be, subject to catching a light should an ember pop out when I wasn't paying attention. So those are kind of two different things, right? Like what's going to be able to comfortably stand the heat of the bench top without off-gassing anything dangerous or posing any risk to combustion. And if you have a J-tube and your J is adjacent to your bench, is there a chance that sparks could get onto the blankets? And if so, then the material needs to be appropriate for that as well. So let's just tackle the first one. Sparks on the blankets is a different issue, and I think that as I've progressed, I now have a different point of view, and that is one of not letting that happen. Whether it's the blankets are moved and they never are left near the J-tube, they're just pulled over when you set there. or whether there's some physical barriers, or whether you don't have them at all. I just think now, in hindsight, I never had any problems, but in hindsight, I just think that's probably, too big a risk to take, to leave unattended, which I felt at the time too, but I don't think I ever really nailed it down and went, here's the rules, take the blankets off when the fire's going if you're not around. But let's approach the first question, which is the padding, the cushion on top of your mass. And so, as Rich found, 300 degrees is sort of a rough number for where things might start combusting. I felt like, much lower than that starts to cause issues with smells and off-gassing, and then really just sitting on it. I mean, you can't sit on it when it's 200 degrees, let alone 300 degrees. You don't want to, obviously. So, with all that said, there's a couple things to tackle there. So the first is that and Rich adds, great, Rich, thank you. The hottest temps I've seen on my bench surface are around 190 under the bedroll. So that's really comparable to my experience, Rich. When I'm burning that stove super hot because it's cold out and I'm burning it for a long time, if my bedroll is down covering, then I can approach 200 degrees under there. But like I said, as soon as you start to get up there to that temperature, first of all, you start to not really be too comfortable sitting on it for more than a minute or two, or a few minutes. And second of all, you start to smell it. And even if it's cotton or wool, you don't smell it burning, but it smells like a dryer, right? It starts to smell like a dryer, like warm cloth, warm fabric. And when I'm burning that hot, it means it's cold out. And when it's cold out, I'm trying to get the most heat into the space. That's why I'm burning that hot. So my solution, and it's not even a solution, it's just it's a natural action I take in those temperatures, is when it's that cold out and I'm burning that hot. In other words, when my bench could be that hot, I almost always peel back. In my case, I just fold up my cushions to expose the masonry surface of the bench in order to get more masonry radiating heat into my space, in order to get more heat into my space, to take more heat out of the mass more quickly, get more heat into the space more quickly. And in that way, you can control. Now, this is aside from the material of the bedroll, but it plays into it. You are controlling how much radiation, how much heat you can put into your space via how much exposed mass you have. And the more you keep that bedroll on, the more the top gets hotter. But what that does is it pushes the heat down. If the top's hotter, then this is hotter, and this is hotter down lower. So you're actually pushing heat down into the sides, and that's why it's nice to have that cover on there. You'll actually heat up more of your mass, and you can open it up and release it. So, with all that said, point I'm trying to make is, I've never heard of cloth material spontaneously combusting on top of the masonry just from contact. I haven't ever heard of anyone even really having an issue like smoke or char or anything. I have gotten mine pretty hot. And mine, the question that Rich really asked originally was material. What's the material that you use? And I'll be honest, Rich, I've come around. You can see behind me that those little tan rectangles under the pillow there. Those are like an outdoor chaise lounge cushion from Costco. It's foam inside with sunbrella fabric on the outside. And I used it because I had it and it just fit right there, and I haven't bothered to make anything else. In the past, I would always use wool blankets, usually like big Pendleton wool blankets that I would pile up and roll up and make thick on top of there, or old army blankets. And I thought those worked great. But come to find out that the foam seems to work fine for me. And whenever I start to get even a hint of the smell of it, I just flip it up and the bench cools off and heats up my space. And so that's that. And so in terms of sleeping on it, I feel like if it's getting that hot, it's probably not very comfortable for sleeping on it. And so really, the most important part of this conversation has less to do with the material of the bench top and more to do with tuning your bench. And that's one of the main reasons why I really like those big hollow bells, because it's really easy to tune them. You can adjust how they heat and where they heat by adjusting where the chimney exit is in terms of elevation, in terms of length down the bell. And that's something that you can't really do with a flue run bench. So, I feel like tuning is a really important part of everyone's rocket stove build. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit, I try to, keep you guys moving forward without really definitively answering a lot of your questions sometimes when you're in the middle of a build, because we just don't know. Josh is a great example. If you guys remember I showed you his big J-tube long bench, and as it turned out, he ended up running the exhaust flue down the bench and ended up being real hot at the far end. So those are things you will learn over time. So let me catch back up with the chat. Robin says, how about an elevated sit-on surface, elevated dog bed-like, on top of a warming bench to allow the warm air to rise under and around the sitting area? Sitting on surface can be made of cotton canvas. Yeah, Robin, that could work. Again, it gets, you start to get a little complex, and I think what you'll find is that it doesn't really need that much complexity or overthinking in the sense that that the bench really is, we should expect it to be comfortable to sit on. To try and get it up to those temperatures where it's radiating a lot of heat, it kind of requires you to cover it and burn hot for 6 or 8 hours and then uncover it. So I don't think you need to worry too much about, whether you're going to burn your butt or whether you're trying to get the heat out underneath you while you're sitting on it. I mean, it's really nice to sit on a 100-degree bench when it's 60 degrees outside or whatever it is, or 50 degrees, and so I think that what a lot of people don't really, until you experience it, it's hard to just grasp that a warm bench is perfect. And if it's a warm bench, it's only good for sitting on, because it won't radiate that much heat into the space when there isn't that much of a temperature difference between the bench and the space. The rate at which temperature travels from a hot place to a cold place is determined largely by the difference in temperature, by the delta. So the bench won't have a big delta, between the air, so it isn't really that valuable as heating surface as much as it is as convective heating, sitting on heating. So hope that makes some sense. So we can come back to that, but let me catch up with chat here. Positive Aspect asks, when building with common bricks with holes, do you fill the holes? Yes, Dan, I do, and I think it's the best practice, and the reason for it is just to get more mass. There's no other real reason. Expansion or cracking or anything like that, it isn't really about trying to bond them together through those holes. It's just to fill them with mass. Now, Belgian Gulch says I filled mine with sand, and while that's probably better than nothing, I'm not sure it's much better than nothing, Belgian Gulch, no offense. Because I think you got so much trapped airspace in there, and once it's encapsulated, nothing can move, that you really are just adding a little insulated plug in there. And that's not picking on you, my friend, just saying, if you can get bricks without holes, I think you're far better along. If you have bricks with holes, personally, I think the best thing to do is just fill them with, I say mortar, but I would say you make yourself some crappy mortar with mud and dirt from outside, and hopefully it has some pebbles and clay, and it'll form into sort of a nice homogeneous heavy mass, high mass mix. You won't use up all your good mortar, because if you're filling a whole build's worth of holes, you're going to go through a lot. You're building half of the bricks, as it were. So there's that. And Rich says, I did melt a yoga mat early on. Yeah, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it's impossible, and especially something like a yoga mat, which probably has a fairly low melting point. But most of your like furniture foam, RV seating foam, something like that, should be fine. So yeah, and Rich says I wouldn't have tried the foam if I hadn't experimented with it and said it was okay. Yeah, I mean, again, everyone's situation is going to be different, Rich. Maybe your bench runs really hot. You'll have to experiment for yourself. But like I said, just sort of covering and uncovering as a way to manage your heat. You think of that mass as a heat battery, and it isn't just static. You can manipulate how it stores heat, how it puts heat in the space, and things like that. And so that's worth playing with. When it's really cold here, like I said, I'll cover that bench at night and then, and burn, and then uncover it in the morning and try and get it to blast heat out, or maybe I'll burn all day and then uncover it in the evening. And, basically just kind of saying that you can fill it up is kind of the thing I'm trying to say, I guess, here. You can cover your bench, fill it up hotter than you could fill it up with no cover, and then uncover it and get more heat into your space than you would otherwise. So you can modulate your output in that way. So, Rich says, this reminds me, I pulled the gravel out of my mass and replaced it with cob a few weeks ago. Game changer for sure. It's like having a whole new, different stove. Rich, thank you. Thank you for being the guy who has experienced both and can speak from experience. Because I feel like for many years now, there's been those of us who have been saying that the gravel is not a great idea, and then there's some people who say, well, it seems to work okay, and I've always felt like if you could experience them back to back, you'd probably know that there's a significant difference. So that's wonderful. That's actually great experience, and that's nothing but helpful for everyone moving forward from here, because hopefully we can start to put those gravel ones behind us. If you're towing your rocket stove with a bike, they make sense. Otherwise, it's a no-go. So there you go. But that's really awesome. Awesome, Rich. Really, really, really positive forward motion for the whole community there, for sure. Because I think we've had a lot of years of that sort of being kicked around as, are we sure it's no good? And so I'm really, really glad. That's great, man. Thank you for doing that. So let's move on. We got some more questions here. Let's see. Did I cover all of yours about the mass and the blankets on top? Does anyone else have any input? I guess Belgian Ghost here, they're in a shop there, so you probably didn't have seating on your rocket mass heater. And so if anyone else has any input about seating or cushions or anything they've used, love to hear it. But I'll move on to the next set of questions. We got some other great stuff to cover here. So let's see. Oh, Rich says, I find it surprising to find that the mass gets hotter faster. I thought it would be a slower process with the added mass. And Rich is referring to the difference between the Pebbles and the cob. And Rich, it would seem that way. But, again, the Pebbles, I know it's really hard to picture them that way because they are stones. But if you were to take those stones, and if you could calculate the volume of those stones and fill up your space, I think you'd probably find that half of that space at least was airspace. And so even though you've got a lot of stones in those Pebbles, you've got a ton of captured airspace. So it really ends up being a highly insulative mix. And so even though the cob has more mass, the cob also has way better conductivity and way better emissivity. Like it can radiate that. It can transfer the heat through its body, through itself, and then it can radiate it out into space, effectively transferring it from that flue into your space. That's something those Pebbles never did. They never did that effectively. Not only would they insulate the flue pipe, but they were poor conductors and they were they had poor emissivity, if you say that word. They don't radiate the heat in space very well because they don't have, each pebble is just a tiny little face facing out with radiation. Everything else is kind of radiating back to the other stones. So there you go. So Tall Shadow, I forgot about my haircut. Thank you. I got sick of it finally. I was, I go to town once every 2 months or something, and I see the only humans I see. And I had gone to go get a haircut, and well, what a pain in the butt, right? So I'd cut my hair twice myself this last few months, and finally I was just like, I'm just gonna buzz it. So thanks. It took me a little bit of courage actually to get up the guts to just buzz it all off, but it feels great. And now I'm used to it. Now I forgot all about it. So thank you. So there's that. So Tall Shadow, let me start over at the beginning since you're late to class. Demerits for you. So anyways, going back to Rich's thing about changing from Pebbles to cob, it seems counterintuitive, and I get it. I understand why we've all for so long, been like, oh, the Pebbles are probably okay. Honestly, it wasn't until Peter and I we're in Montana with our testos, testing that large 8-inch batch that we had built. And at the end of a long bench, the temperatures were basically the same as when they went in. And we noticed that through the whole weekend, that because we were measuring temps out of the bell, out of the second bell, into the bench, out of the bench, and come to find out, it'd go in the bench and go through the other end of the bench. And it was a long bench; it was like 15 or 20 feet, and the temperature didn't change much in there. So we just knew that we were getting better insulation, better insulative characteristics in there. So it's easy to see to think that the gravel would be a good mass, but it's not. It's terrible. It's very, very poor. So anyways, awesome to hear you changed to cob. Glad to hear you're getting great results. Highly recommend it for anyone with gravel in their bench. It's worth the change. Or just leave it open, as I like to do for a bell. So that said, let's move on to the next question. So this question comes from Belgian Gulch. And let's see here. Belgian Gulch, we got some great photos to look at, which is awesome. Thank you for sending those along, my friend. Really cool. And he's got a simple question relating to the secondary air stub. He says, when using the stainless exhaust pipe, how are you attaching the stub to the tubing? Are you welding or tapping and bolting? And it's a great question. So Belgian Gulch, the reason that I liked those exhaust tubes was because they had that exhaust flange on the bottom. And using that exhaust flange, a person could drill and tap the tubing and simply screw the vertical section to the horizontal section. And in that way, I could basically remove the difficult or intimidating parts of the metalwork for all of my customers and all of the builders and people who, find the welding to be out of the scope of what they can handle. So that was my goal with those exhaust parts. So I do recommend drilling and tapping. I think that's the best way to do it. It's really easy. You can buy a 1/4-20 combination metal drill end tap, and they're pretty easy to break, so be careful with them, but it'll get you through this job for $10 or so. And the screws do spall over the time in there. You could probably use I don't know if there'd be any kind of lube actually that would hold up in there. Maybe some anti-seize because it's copper based, but my solution to that was I was just cleaning the firebox every couple months anyway, so I was pulling it out and just sort of working the screws. But really, I guess what I'd like to finish with is that any vertical metal solution other than the RA330 is not going to last. So I do find those exhaust parts to be quite usable. They're affordable. That flange makes them easy for anyone to use. Black iron, regular stainless or regular black steel pipe in 2-inch works great, but it does require usually welding to fasten it to the horizontal, and so it takes a little bit more tools and things like that on the part of the builder. And so I think the exhaust, when I say the stainless exhaust parts, those parts from Amazon that are made for car exhausts, those do represent a little bit of a simplified approach. But I guess what I'm really trying to say is I really recommend going to the RA330 for anyone who is looking for permanence, because I think that's how you're going to get it. Now, with that said, consumables are a big part of all wood stoves. So I don't think permanence is something really to expect. And I say that even when I say permanence on that secondary air piece with RA330, and I do think it is a forever piece, there'll be other things that need maintenance in your stove. So it isn't like you won't have things to fix. But that's it. So Permaculture Playground says, I would rather weld than drill stainless, and that's true. And so that's what's nice about those exhaust flanges is that they're stainless. They have a stainless flange on the bottom, but I'm just drilling into mild steel. The lower section is just mild steel. And that lower horizontal section can be any just regular mild steel. It's only up high in the firebox that gets hot enough to eat these things. So Mark asks, have I tried Inconel? And I have not, Mark. And the reason I have not is because I went right to the RA330, and frankly, it's it is the right material for the job. The Inconel may work. I have tried some various stainlesses, and they do not hold up. So you do need that high nickel content. We do have someone here, David Swanson, who has tried Inconel. He's got a little bit of a different stove configuration, so I'm not ready to say that it's definitive that it will hold up, but I think it's probably definitely better than any of the other steel, options. So I think it's on the road to the right path. What I found was that RA330. I got my stub of RA330 shipped to me, cut to length, for about $80. I wasn't able to find any Inconel or higher rated nickel stainless, like 310 or 316. I wasn't able to find any of those for any less expensive or more available than that RA330. The RA330 was easy to get. The supplier has an online resource and cuts and ships right to you. And it was, while it wasn't affordable, it wasn't exponentially, unaffordable. So I feel like just skipping right to the RA330 is great, but I would love to hear more Inconel experiments. David Swanson, like he says, he's had good luck with it. So, give it a try. See what you think. So Pete says, my stainless exhaust 314 still holds up great. No degradation whatsoever. So that's great, Pete. So there we go. So 314 is a high nickel stainless. The highest I was able to test was the they said 309, 310, but those were those car parts, and I don't really trust that they're actually 309. So there you go. So yeah. And do, Mark, if you try that in Inconel, please let us know. I'd love to hear what your take is on it. So we'll get more time under the, as we go through another season here. David, you keep us informed as well. I got a feeling it's going to be fine. I think you're right, David. I think Inconel's going to work just fine and hold up. So there's all that. So all right, you guys, let's see. I've got some photos we could go over. Let me see if I got the rest of the questions here. Let's see. I'm going to cover Tall Shadow's question here. And I know, Tall Shadow, that your question isn't really a stove chat question per se, since it's so specific, but I think I'll cover it here because it's a good one. And it reminds me of a lapse in my website that I could probably go address that I probably will forget about and will never change. But so I'll talk about it here, and I'll imagine that the people who need to see it will somehow find it. No, hopefully I'll do better than that. But Tall Shadow, it's a great question, and Tall Shadow's question is regarding my riserless core. I have my riserless core layout illustrated via photos on my website, and there's a page called Riserless Core, and it shows the layer by layer build of my core using insulated fire bricks. And in my first riserless core, I placed a window at the 180 degree turn at the back of the firebox as a viewing window for use in the layout of my full masonry cook stove. Now, that window is placed on the back side of the bricks that form the core, so it creates sort of an extra large gap around the central divider of the two sides of the 180 degree combustion chamber. So, Belgian Gulch is asking, if I delete that window, if I bring those bricks all the way into where the back wall of the rest of the core is, then it seems like I pinch off that gap at the back of the firebox. And that's true, Belgian Gulch, and it's something that I caution. I think somewhere in that website there's wording about that. Perhaps not. Maybe I've just written it to so many people, but you don't want to pinch that gap. And if you fill the window gap, the window hole, and you put the bricks flush with the other bricks, you will pinch that gap. So what I recommend is that you maintain that gap the same size as the width of the final port. in that same design. And off the top of my head, I think it's like, I want to say it's, God, I don't even want to guess, but because it's been so long, I think it's just stronger, a little bit stronger than 2 inches. I want to say it's like 2 3/8 or something like that, nominal. Try and leave it at any rate bigger than that, and you'll be fine. So what we want is we want to make sure the port is the area of most restriction, the port at the end of the second combustion chamber. So yeah, David. So yeah, that's why, David. That's why I say you're in Canella's a little. We're waiting to see. Your build's a little different. I know you've got some unique features going on in your build, David, that make it just a little, a little different than my designed core. I'm not picking on it. It's awesome. I'm just saying we can't really compare apples to apples because, well, for instance, it's 8 inch with a 3/4 inch gap, which is too small. No offense. And you've got a window there at the end of your combustion chamber. I hate to say it, but I think if we put a testo on your core, I don't think it would be doing all that it could. Because I think that there are some things there that some decisions made for aesthetics and things like that, which I'm totally okay with. Like, I think your window at the end of the combustion chamber there is cool as heck. And, like I say, it's a little bit of a compromise for efficiency probably. But it's fine. And I just think all of those things are going to change the way your gap works. So ideally your gap would be about 3 inches on an 8 inch build, David, and I do feel like you're probably suffering a little bit from a narrow gap. Just speculating though. I haven't seen it, and if it's working fine for you, that's all that matters. So please don't take that personally or whatever. Yeah, 2 1/4 tall shadow. That's what I thought. So that gap should be 2 1/4 minimum, ideally. So, okay, let's move on. So, let's see, guys. I wanted to go over photos from Belgian Gulch. So, that's next. So, let's take a look at this. We've got some great stuff here to look at. And super excited. So Belgian Gulch has been working on his door, and I'm just going to start. I don't remember where the last ones that we looked at were, so I'm just going to start here, and let's see if I can get this up. So this is looking into his door. I'm assuming looks like he's got a ripping fire going there. That is awesome. And we're going to take a look at the door first here. We've seen the door already, but he sent me some more pictures. But what I really want to get to is he's tearing down his stove here. So we'll move through these door photos. That looks awesome. Belgian Gulch. Very, very cool. So I want to let people know that Belgian Gulch is, I think, maybe it's too early. I'll hold off Belgian Gulch. You tell me when it's time. But I love these doors. I think something like that's going to be in my future. The safety aspect, Belgian Gulch, that you've incorporated into this is really great, allowing the secondary air to come in where it needs to come in, but blocking all ember, ejection, and still allowing for a window. Man, really cool. Very, very, very cool. So, looks super robust too. You can just tell this thing is not going to get deformed. Looks great, man. Awesome. So here we go. This is what I wanted to get to, because this is going to show some really, really, really good stuff for all of us. So this is Belgian Gulch. Belgian Gulch, are you still here? Chime in if you would, and remind me of what we're looking at. I think that this is an 8-inch J, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I know you have I can't remember what you have now. I know you have a mix of 7 and 8, and I can't remember if your chimney's 7 and your stoves are 8, or your stoves are 7 and your chimney's 8. Anyways, this is the J that Belgian Gulch has had, I believe, in his shop for a few years now. And as you can see, it was a simple clay perlite build with a brick surround, which I highly recommend this method. Takes away a lot of the issues. You can just build the core inside and fill around the outside with clay and perlite, and the whole thing's supported all the way around. So it is an 8-inch J. Thanks for that, Belgian Gulch. Sorry to put you on the spot there. It is an 8-inch J. Oh, this is your studio. Okay, not the shop, but the studio. And I love this construction style. You guys know I've adopted bricks, and I think bricks are a really great way to approach rocket mass heater construction because they're affordable, they're heavy and high mass, they just give you a really, easy method of building an outer shell, and then they provide the stability with which to infill. Tall Shadow's been asking me a lot about how to support his cores, and this I think is a great example of one way to do it. So fantastic example here. Belgian Gulch, and it looks like you cobbed up around the radiator to slow some of the radiant heat and to sort of tune the stove to have a certain heating profile. So it heats up off the top of that barrel, heats the space quickly, but hopefully radiates a little slower and with a little more control, and probably you can be a little nearer to it with that cob around the barrel. How did you find that, Belgian Gulch? Was cobbing the barrel an effective method for you? Did you achieve a nice heating profile on that with your barrel half covered like that? I'd love to hear about it. So Belgian Gulch is changing from this, and he's changing to a 6-inch batch. And so here he is demoing this old J. You can see that cob cover around the barrel and starting to take apart the core. And I'm assuming you're just going to fill this in and build the batch on top of it. That's what it looked like from your photos. But here's that core coming apart. You can see the fly ash hanging inside, and that his core is still in really good shape. And I believe you've had this for a few years now. I think you told me it kind of eroded here, and you had to catch it and patch it. But it looks good. So, and Belgian Gulch says yes, the cob surround around the barrel worked perfect. So that's great. That's something that everyone should keep in mind. If you're building a stove and you have a large radiating surface, you can adjust how fast that puts heat into your space by covering some of that metal with cob. So a little more deconstruction photos, getting into that J. Here's the old riser. Now this is my 7 years he burned this. So here's my original riser technique. This is using a grease drum, a 17-gallon grease drum with a clay and perlite inner liner that was originally poured around a standard flue pipe that then burns out of there your first few burns. So I loved seeing this Belgian Gulch because I have 2 or 3 of these that look just like that sitting down in my shop, and they're perfect, and I can use them over and over again. And the one in my house is still in there after, what's it been now, 9 years, I think. So and you wrapped fiberglass around the barrel. Oh, the outer barrel, I'm assuming. Now, Belgian Gulch is talking about I'm assuming he's talking about the outer barrel, fiberglass in the cob, just the cloth to be the fiber within that cob to hold it around that outer barrel and keep it from cracking off of there, which those fibers make a big difference. So anyways, speaking about risers, this is still a really viable way to build a riser. I do think the 5-minute riser is obviously superior, but this is an absolutely wonderful way to build one if you're trying to just get by with mostly found materials. You'd still have to buy perlite, but there are some things you could use. You could use rice husks or hulls or things like that to try and achieve the same installative outer. So there's that. So, and then we start in on the new build, and this is really cool to see, Belgian Gulch. And again, I would like you to point your friend Tall Shadow to this. So Tall Shadow, when you kept asking me about building, your cores with the fire brick splits and things like that, this is really what we want to see, right? We want to see that core, the insulative inner layer, backed by a firm outer construction with support all the way out to it. So gold stars all around here, Belgian Gulch. This looks awesome. Now, Belgian Gulch is using insulative fire bricks for the inner, but his insulative fire bricks are fairly dense, so they don't really suffer from much abrasion. There's not much concern here about abrasion resistance. If you were using something really soft for your insulative layer, like ceramic fiberboard, you could do this same construction flipped around, and I would put those heavy fire bricks on the inside. I might not, but you would. In other words, some people, really get concerned about the abrasion wear inside the firebox, and if that's the case, I think it's just fine to do heavy fire brick inside, insulated fire brick outside. In that case, I would prefer to see split fire brick on the inside, so that there's not as much mass inside the firebox. But there's a couple different ways you could approach this, depending on your goals, depending on your use, depending on who's using it, and all those things. So this is a really, 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 really great example of a build, and Tall Shadow, man, Belgian Gulch, like Tall Shadow says, gold stars all around on this one. This is one that I think anyone here who hasn't started a build yet can take some really good notes from. Just mainly that concept of an insulated core surrounded by a firm shell, high mass shell. So that will take you a long ways. That insulated core, it could be just those insulated fire bricks, then it could be all cob, and this thing could look like a big worm. But it would achieve the same thing. All that cob around the outside would hold that insulative inner layer stable. The insulative inner layer would allow for the properties we require inside the combustion area. So there's that. That is so cool to see. I love that, Belgian Gulch. It's really great. He's got a secondary air piece going in on the bottom there. You can see he's got a spot for it laid in, cut in there, ports coming together, and then his 6-minute riser that we talked about in a previous chat there, laid behind it, interfacing with the port. And here's how it's going to start to come together here. So as you can see, these builds can be really quite simple. As we've gone farther along on this path, we've gotten to a point where we're starting to come up with some techniques and materials and practices that allow one to stack these things together pretty simply with pretty basic materials easily available. And I'm thrilled to see this. This is, I think just about anyone could approach a build like this with these simple modules, as it were, and have great success and have an unbelievable stove. So Belgian Gulch, cut to size secondary air, exactly right. So that's the right thing to do. You lay that secondary air in there first, leave it extra long, just like he's got here, sticking out the off the edge, and then proceed with your build. Finish your build, place your door, and then cut your secondary air to size, because the distances here are going to change depending on all of the mortar used, door used, skin techniques, all of those things. So Rich Points asks, how long of a burn can you get from a batch box like this? And Rich, the answer really, of course, is going to vary depending on your type of fuel and all those things. But typically with a batch box like this, if you're burning back to back, like let's say you are going to burn all day and you're trying to get, maximum heat out of it, you're probably going to be loading this thing just a little, close, probably right around every hour. Whereas if it were a J, you'd probably be loading it, every 20 minutes to half an hour. So probably just about, twice the burn length. Now, you can certainly load it, close it down, and in a lot of, like in Peter Vandenberg's case, that's the only burn you do for the whole day. So it really depends on how you burn and things like that. But for the most part, if you're burning full tilt the way a rocket stove should burn, and you want to keep it going at full tilt, it's going to be about every hour. But in reality, you don't really do it like that. The reality is you probably put a load in, and then you probably wait that hour, and then you might wait another half an hour. You know, when Belgian Gulch says this stove will burn all day, and my stove burns all day. But that doesn't mean I'm just, you know, one load right on top of the other. I'm usually using that mass to moderate, and in, you know, depending on how things are balanced in my house and the outer air and all that stuff, I'm usually, when I say burning all day, it might be 4 loads a day, right? Or 6 loads a day, something like that. So really, in practice, I load it probably every 2 or 3 hours. But if you're asking, like, how fast does it eat a load, it'll eat a load in under an hour, for sure. That is, yeah, that's basically that stove. Let's see, we'll just take a look at the rest of the photos here. Really cool Belgian Gulch, really neat to see. And I don't remember, no, I think that's it. We got to the end of that. So you're still in the early phases here, but I can't wait to see you get this all together. I think it's going to come together beautiful. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing. So yeah, and David Swanson says the same thing. David's using a riserless core with a screw together steel frame, and he's got an inch thick CFB, and the box has split fire brick liner for abrasion resistance. Really cool build, by the way. It's really neat. We've seen pictures of it here, and he says each reload filling the box as down to coals is about hourly. So that's another great example, and that's about it. It's about hourly if you're going, you know, one right on the back of the other. Like I said, the way I use mine is about, probably in practice, every 2 or 3 hours I'm probably putting a load in, depending on temperatures and things like that. So there's that. And let's see, let me get back to, yeah, I think that, well, I've got, let's see, you guys. Yeah, I don't think I got time to go into that right now. Okay. So hopefully Belgian Gulch says before next stove chat it should be burning. That would be awesome, Belgian Gulch. I'd love to see it. That's you got your work cut out for you. Man, I'm kind of envious. I keep thinking maybe I'm going to change something up on mine, but I don't think it's going to be this year. But I'm ready for a build, I'll tell you. I'm itching. But that's going to be fun to look at. So I've got a few more builds, actually, that I am hoping to get to share photos with, but I don't think we should start today because one of them's a big one, and we're going to go, it's going to go a long ways, and we're just about at an hour here already. So David says, reloads over fuel with soot on combustion glass, but burns off in less than 5 minutes. Yeah, that's pretty normal, David. I think that's exactly to be expected, you know, especially when you're loading. Within that hour, right on top of those other ones, you will get a little bit of an overfuel situation. Usually, like you said, it clears up pretty much right away and no smoke out of the chimney. So you're just getting the soot on the combustion chamber. So that's fine. But you know, I think it sounds like it's working great, to be honest. And yeah, Belgian Gulch, I can tell you're having fun. And you know, like I said, I would like to reiterate that that Belgian Gulch's build there, I think, is a really great example of where we're going with this thing, right? Belgian Gulch, I think that you are going to be able to inspire a whole lot of people. Because we have slowly, over these past few years, you guys, I think all of us as a group, we have collectively been removing barriers to building these things, right? We've been trying to spread the word that these are not terrifying, that these don't have to be giant projects that require a workshop full of 14 people's, you know, help, or you won't get it built. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, by the way. I love the workshops. They're really fun. But I really just want to encourage people that it's something you can tackle on your own or with a partner, or, you know, and it doesn't need to be a big, daunting ordeal. We talked about it last week when we talked about pre-built doubts, you know, especially cob. People haven't worked with it, wonder, they can't picture how this whole thing is going to come together. And so I just want to encourage Belgian Gulch you to take these concepts, that we're all kind of putting into this basket, right? Our insulated interiors, our supportive outer exteriors, our rigid shells, hopefully built with something affordable and durable, and it could be cob. Cob fits those things too, but it doesn't have to be. There's other solutions like brick. The 5-minute, 6-minute risers, the brick bells. I think that honestly, I think that the advent of us just building with simple red brick bells and kind of getting away from all the complexity of the European double skin and the liners and the fire bricks on edge with the masonry, all that stuff just terrifies people, and most of it isn't necessary. The clay sand mortar, getting us away from the complexities of lime based and cracks, and it makes patching easy. If you do get cracks in your skin, you can just go over it with a wet sponge. I mean, I think we're really getting there. I think we're starting to put together build plans that are going to allow us to get these things out there, because I think all people need to do is experience these, and we will be able to change the world. We can make our air quality better in our neighborhoods for our kids. And I know it sounds trite, but that's really what I believe in. I mean, that's really why I'm doing this. And I really think that that everything that we can do to make these easier and more approachable will get more people to experience them. And once they experience them, they'll be just like all of us. They'll be hooked, right? It's hard to deny when you're sitting on one of these things and then you go to a neighbor's house with a metal box stove and it's smoking out the neighborhood. I mean, when I go home every holiday season, I walk through a cloud of smoke down the driveway, and it's comforting. It smells like going home for the holidays, but it doesn't have to be that way. So that's it. So Permaculture Playground, we have time for a question. We can, if it's not a big one, let's look at it. About the double skin bell, I've wondered what the advantage of that is. A question for next week. We can go farther and farther into it, but I'll just cover it real quick. And I think that it is a function of a long tradition of European masonry builds that were built around a certain set of expectations and parameters. Those builds were huge. I mean, it would make up, literally like the center of the house. Like it would be the wall all the way through the ceiling with the chimney. And they would have fires that would have like 200 pounds of wood in them. And they would use setting mortars often. And I think they had different expectations. I mean, here's the thing: a double skin allows you a lot more flexibility on what you can put on the outside. So on those double skins in that millennia-old culture, there's the Polish tradition of tile stoves, right? They have these beautiful tile outer skins on these heavy fire brick inner skins. So I think more than anything, it gave them a lot as they went through the centuries and refined their craft. I think more than anything, it just allowed them to go from sort of rough masonry stoves like we are sort of reverting back to, and allowed them to build really nice refined stoves with very fancy skins, like beautiful soapstone finishes and things like that. And to be honest, I still think that if you're going to spend $100,000 or $200,000 on a masonry heater, that a double skin is the way to go. What I'm trying to say is that we, as a rocket stove community, sort of were falling into that trap of that it was mandatory, that's how you have to build a masonry heater. And while I think there are some advantages to a double skin, I think it is, not mandatory. And you can absolutely build DIY masonry heaters like I do, like we do, without that element. So I'll just say that. But one of the biggest advantages, Permaculture Playground, is just extra mass as well, in addition to the finish, and some of it takes away some of the material differences, and allows you to do some different stuff. Put some metal and things on the outer skin that might not shear off like they would on the inner skin, and then and then it just adds more mass in the same space. So there's a few different answers there. So, and then Belgian Gulch, thanks for giving me the go-ahead. I don't know if it's official yet, but I do want to just announce really quickly before we go off the air here that Belgian Gulch is planning to make those doors that I showed and secondary air tubes available. And I believe, it may be a little premature, but I believe he's made contact with Luke at Rocket Stove Cores, and I think they're going to work together. And I'm really hopeful, because I would love to be able to send my customers to one place, so you guys, those of you who are building to my plans, if you so desire, you can buy a core and have it shipped right to you. You can buy a custom-made door and a custom-made secondary air and have it shipped right to you. So I know you're not there yet, Belgian Gulch, but I know you're working towards it. So you guys just sit tight, but know that that's hopefully coming, and I'm real excited about that, Belgian Gulch. Really excited. So I'm just going to catch back up a little bit on the chat. See it on small batch box heaters as well. Yeah, permaculture, you do. You'll see double skin on bigger and smaller. And like I said, I think it's because I think a lot of people do it because they felt like we have to. And I don't. I haven't found that to be the case. Like I said, I think the big masonry heater people got there because it allowed them to do fancy finishes and everything else. And the culture now says, you must build with double skins. But as we've found out from now years of building them ourselves the simple way, it's not mandatory. But yes, you will see them. And you will. If you were to, you would definitely, I definitely run into people who are not comfortable with my single skin stoves because they are just ingrained in that paradigm. I think if they lived with one, experienced it, they'd be like, oh, right, that's fine. But yeah, no, you'll see them on smaller stoves. Absolutely. So that's, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think double skin is something that we sort of adopted from the masonry heater culture, because masonry heater culture is millennia old and they know how to build masonry heaters, and we should pay attention to them. But at the same time, I don't think that we need to just say, well, there's only one right way to do it. So that's what I'm saying. They both have a place and they're both valid, and I don't think there's any downside to a single skin, to be honest with you. I haven't had any issues with it at all, especially with the clay sand mortar. So there you go. Robin says a batch box rocket mass heater stores. Yeah, that's what we're going for, Robin. That's the goal. So Tall Shadow says, after experiencing all this smoke from the wildfires recently, it's nice to know we're not making more smoke during the winter to breathe in. It is a major pollutant. I hate to say it because I love wood burning, but if we can do better, it'll make a difference. And Permaculture Playground says, I guess you end up with more heat in the bench because the bell doesn't radiate as much. And yeah, Permaculture Playground, if you double your skins, you're going to, move heat downstream, and you'll absorb more heat. And David Swanson says, on a cold stove, I use a propane torch to heat the back of the burn chamber for 30 seconds or so, and then turn the flame on the kindling and almost no smoke back. And that's the way to do it, man. If you can heat up, so it's pulling in the direction it's going, that's a great way to start. So good luck on your new business, Belgian Gulch. I second that, Tall Shadow. So good luck, Belgian Gulch. I'll be right there with you the whole way. So I think it's something we could really use. I've been happy to recommend those Pisla doors, but I'd be much happier to recommend something that was built by someone within the community and that was built specifically for these. So and actually, Max Edelson at Fire Speaking, I should talk about his doors. He's got some great doors, some great hardware available. He's a great guy. You guys should definitely check out his hardware, and if you can support him, highly recommend it. He doesn't have any doors that fit my designs right now, so these custom doors are really the best way to go, in my opinion. But if you're building something unique, do check out Fire Speaking. I'll just give everyone a little bump right there. So there's all that. Yeah, always learning. Double the skin, double the mass, longer to heat up, and longer to give the heat off as well. And Mark says, my single skin bell works fine, sand, clay, mortar, heavy fire brick on edge. Yeah, Mark, and that's just it. That's been my experience. in my experience as well, I prefer the performance of the single skin bell because I'm usually doing sort of a shorter cycle here, and I'm trying to build smaller stoves, right? So it'd be hard to get my cook stove down very small if I doubled the skin. So, but great to hear. I haven't had any issues, and I haven't had anyone have any issues. There's quite a few of my stoves out there now. And the best thing about that sand clay mortar is you tuck and point it when the whole thing's hot and expanded. And so when it cools, it doesn't crack. And should it crack, you can just, like I said, take a wet sponge and dig out a little back into where it's cracked and re-tuck and point, and you're back to brand new again. So there you go. And Robin asks Belgian Gulch to please make a matching oven door. So Belgian Gulch, looks like you got a whole new career in front of you, my friend. You better get busy, because I'm going to second that. We could use oven doors. We could use just a little bit of everything, my friend. Firebox doors, cooktop surrounds, frames, metal top frames for around the masonry stove, exhaust flues, secondary air parts. We'll keep you busy. All right, you guys. Well, we're well over an hour here, so I think I'm going to cut it off here. I've got some great stuff to look at next week. I love to get some more questions and photos and whatever. Dan, I did get your email. I'm sorry I can't open it while we're streaming here, but we'll take a look at those. And please, you guys, feel free to send photos, send questions, send me your builds. Love to see them. Love helping you guys out. And yeah. That's it. So I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you guys so much, as always, for being here, for listening and watching and chiming in and being a part of it. Really, really, really means a lot to me, and I think we're making some headway here, you guys. Hopefully we're going to see a lot more of these things crop up over this winter, and you guys are a big part of that. So, all right, you guys, I'm going to hit the outgoing video and sign off, and I hope you guys have a great day. All right, I'll see you guys next week, same time, same place. Thanks, you guys.